Hello. We are going to be going over the circulatory system. Now, this is a longer lesson, so if you need to pause while going through this, that is totally recommended. Now, this is chapter 102, section 0.7. We are going to go over the cardiovascular system and also the lymph vascular system. So, some amazing facts about the circulatory system. The heart beats about 100,000 times a day. The heart also beats about 3 billion times in the average person's life. And within a tiny droplet of blood, there are some 5 million red blood cells. It takes about 20 seconds also for a red blood cell to circulate through the whole body. Now, the circulatory or the vascular system controls the circulation of the blood and the lymph through your body. As a salon professional, we use massage treatments that will directly influence or stimulate the circulatory system itself. Now, the two subcategories, we have cardiovascular or blood vascular system and lymph vascular or lymphatic system. So your cardiovascular system, this is responsible for circulation of the blood, and that includes your heart, your arteries, veins, and your capillaries. Whereas your lymph vascular system includes lymph nodes, gland-like structures, and also the lymphatic vessels, and this is responsible for circulation of lymph. So the cardiovascular system, a little bit more in depth. So in this, we know that it includes the heart. This is a cone-shaped muscular organ located in the chest. It's normally about the size of a closed fist. This rugged muscle of the organ entirely encased in a membrane called the pericardium contracts and relaxes to force blood to move through the circulatory system itself. The interior of the heart contains 4 chambers. There's an upper chamber, and this is going to consist of the right atrium and the left atrium, whereas the lower chamber consists of the right ventricle and the left ventricle. The average resting heart rate is 60 to 100 beats per minute, according to impulses received by the sympathetic nervous system and the vagus, which regulates the heartbeat. So the parts of the heart, here we don't focus too much on the responsibilities of each and every area, but the parts of the heart itself. You have the pericardium, the right atrium, so here, the left atrium, and then we have the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Also within this, we think about blood. So blood is the sticky, salty fluid that circulates through your body, and it brings nourishment and oxygen to all body parts. It also carries toxins and waste products to the liver and the kidneys to be eliminated from the body. On average, an adult has 8 to 10 pints of blood flowing through the circulatory system. The function of our blood is to transport oxygen, waste, nutrients, and hormones, also to protect the body from threat of infections and disease-causing bacteria, and also to regulate the temperature, your pH balance, and blood pressure of the body. So within blood, we can see we have many components. The 3 main components, you have plasma, white blood cells, and red blood cells, which I'm sure we've all heard of before. Now, within your red blood cells, these are really responsible for carrying oxygen, and they contain what's called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin attracts oxygen molecules through a process known as oxygenation. This means to combine with oxygen. The blood appears bright red in color when the oxygen is being carried. However, when oxygen is low, the blood appears to be a deep scarlet red color. And as those red blood cells move throughout your body, they release oxygen molecules and collect molecules of carbon dioxide. Now, your white blood cells, if you've heard before, especially with everything going on right now, I've heard a couple terms being thrown out there talking about this because they are really there to fight bacteria and other foreign substances that enter the body. And then they will increase in number when your infection invades the body. So your white blood cells the count will increase. And this shows you about how much percentage-wise they really are composed of within your blood. So plasma is about 55%, white blood cells make about 4%, and then your red blood cells are 41%. You also have blood platelets. These are responsible for the clotting of blood. They start the process of coagulation or clotting when they are exposed to air or rough surfaces like when you get a bruise. And then your plasma is the fluid part of the blood. This is about 90% water. Plasma is the fluid part of the blood in which red and white blood cells and blood platelets are suspended to be carried throughout the body by the liquid's flow. That makes up about 55% of the blood and contains about 90% of water. Now moving into blood vessels, we have two main ideas behind this. There are going to be your arteries versus your veins. Your arteries are going to be, as you can see, a comparison side by side. We have both of these ideas being tubular in shape, elastic. However, arteries are going to be thick-walled versus veins are thin-walled. Arteries are also going to carry pure blood or blood containing oxygen, and which that is the color in bright red, from the heart to the body or through the body. And then your veins are going to carry blood to your heart. So they're going to carry the impure blood from the capillaries to the heart. Within veins, they are positioned closer to the outer surface of the body than arteries are, and they also receive blood back from the capillaries through smaller diameter blood vessels called venules. And then capillaries. Capillaries are going to be responsible for taking nutrients and oxygen from the arteries to the cells. And then they also take waste products from your cells to the veins. Now, you may have heard of varicose veins before. Varicose veins are bulges that might form in veins that stretch and lose their elasticity. Salon professionals may experience varicose veins due to long periods of standing. So we recommend using support hose, appropriate sized shoes, comfort shoes to help prevent those. Now, the process of blood traveling from the heart throughout the body and back to the heart is referred to as a systemic or general circulation. And this is how we would describe that. So within this diagram, it shows you oxygen poor blood enters the right atrium of the heart through the superior vena cava and in the inferior vena cava. Then from the right atrium, the blood is pumped through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, the blood is pumped into the pulmonary artery, and then the blood travels through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, where it is oxygenated. This phase of the circulation of blood is referred to as pulmonary circulation. Then from the lungs, the newly oxygenated blood returns to the heart via the pulmonary vein and enters the heart's left atrium. Blood is then pumped from the left atrium to the left ventricle by the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. And then from the left ventricle, the blood pumps through the aortic valve into the aorta. And then lastly, the blood then flows from the aorta to all the other arteries, capillaries, veins, and it circulates through that body only to return and begin the circulatory process over again. These are arteries and veins of the face, head, and neck. So starting over here at number 1, we have the common carotid artery. This supplies the blood to the head, face, neck. Then we have 2, which is going to be your internal carotid artery. This is going to supply blood to brain, eyes, forehead, and then they will branch out and start to supply some blood to parts of the forehead and the eyes as well. Then you have your external carotid. This is going to supply blood to skin and muscles of the head. It splits into the occipital area, posterior, and superficial temporal area. Then at 4, we have our internal jugular vein. This returns all the blood from your head, face, and neck back to the heart. And then your external jugular vein returns all the blood from the head, face, and neck to the heart. Over here, this is about where your occipital bone is. This is going to be called the occipital artery. This is going to branch of the external carotid artery, and it supplies blood to the back of the head up to the crown. The posterior auricular artery, number 7, is going to branch. It's going to be a branch of the external carotid artery. This supplies blood to your scalp and above and behind your ears. 8 is your superficial temporal, so your temporal bone or your temple area. That is going to it's a branch of the external carotid artery, and that supplies blood to sides and top of the head. And then it branches into smaller arteries, which we'll talk about in a second. And then lastly is your external maxillary or facial artery. This supplies blood to the lower portion of your face, including your mouth, your nose, and then into smaller arteries, which are here. So within here, we have a little bit smaller arteries that you focus on. In the superficial temporal branches, that's going to be supplying blood to the sides and top of your head. You have the frontal area, the parietal area, the middle temporal. Those are going to be your forehead areas where it supplies blood, the crown and sides of the head, and then your temple area. It also has the transverse, which is going to supply blood to the masseter muscle. And then the anterior auricular, which supplies blood to the anterior part of your ear. And then down here with these smaller arteries, we've got our external maxillary, or aka facial artery, that breaks into smaller branches and supplies your blood to the lower portion of the face, including the mouth and the nose. Now, the 3 subcategories within that, you have submental, inferior labia, and superior labial. The submental, it's a branch of the external maxillary artery, and that supplies blood to your chin and lower lip. The inferior labia, that is going to branch. It's a branch of the external maxillary artery that supplies blood to the lower lip. And then the superior labial is going to supply blood to the upper lip and your septum area. Arteries of the hand and the arm. So we have the ulnar artery. This is going to supply blood to the little finger, side of the forearm, and the smaller arteries of your hand. And then the radial is going to supply blood to the thumb, side of the arm, and the hand as well. So ulnar and then radial. Arteries and veins of the lower leg and foot. You have the popliteal artery. That's supplying blood to the knee joints, muscle in the thigh, and also calf. 2, we've got the anterior tibial. This is supplying blood just below the knee and passes down between the tibia and the fibula and to branch off into smaller arteries to the skin and lower muscles in the leg. The posterior tibial supplies blood beneath the calf muscle to the skin, muscles, and other tissues of the lower leg. Down here at 4, we have dorsalis pedis that supplies blood to the upper surface of the foot. Up here, the saphenous vein that transports blood from veins to the foot to the femoral artery. And then up here you have your femoral vein, which is transporting blood to the heart and lungs for oxygenation. All right, so then moving into the other category we were talking about at the beginning, you have the lymphavascular system. This is the second subsystem of the circulatory system, and it's responsible for picking up and returning leaked tissue fluid and plasma proteins to the cardiovascular system. Other functions would include transporting nourishment from the blood, carrying away products of metabolism and chemical change. It helps to maintain fluid balance in your body and to distribute white blood cells to help develop immunity. Now, lymph is a colorless liquid. It's produced by a byproduct in the process through which plasma passes nourishment to capillaries and cells that travels through lymph vessels, which are those thin-walled valve structures we talked about, which help to maintain blood volume and pressure. Now, lymph nodes filter foreign particles from the lymph vessels. Swollen or tender lymph nodes indicate infection of the body. So if you've ever been sick before, usually the lymph nodes in your face and neck could kind of give that hint off that maybe you have an infection existing. And they're most often affected in the neck and also the underarms. Many other circumstances may be causing the swelling. Make sure you consult a doctor at any first sign of swelling in those areas. And that is it. That finishes out. So definitely the lymphatic system is a little bit shorter than that first portion we focus in on with the cardiovascular. Definitely takes a little bit more time to kind of go over those, similar to the muscular system and the nervous system too within this chapter. Just takes a little bit more time. Luckily, the other test that we are taking next week, again, is that Beta hair color. It's a 25-question test, so it doesn't take too long, and we will review that throughout the week. So definitely take your time with this one, and I will see you all soon.